During this season of Lent, at First Christian Church, we are looking at our mission statement to remind us of our purpose, our reason to be, the reason that we do what we do, and the reason that we get together. In our first week, we looked at our first part of our mission statement that said at First Christian Church, what's it say? Our purpose is to be and share the good news of Jesus Christ. To be and share. And to be and share through witnessing, through loving, and through serving. And we covered all of that in those first 2 weeks, and we did it pretty thoroughly, so if you weren't here, you can watch it on DVDs. We've got them. Or you can go to YouTube and look it up. It's on there too. But we didn't finish that one because we didn't say from our doorsteps to the end of the earth. And First Christian Church does have a ministry from our doorsteps to the ends of the earth. Sometimes we may not think that, but we do. One of the ways is in the offering that we are collecting this morning, the Week of Compassion offering, which goes wherever there is a natural disaster to support the people and the agencies that are bringing aid to the people. But we also do it in more direct ways. You might remember that a few years ago, Nancy and Ed Ball went to South Africa for 2 years as missionaries from this church. That we have folks that go to Ecuador and Honduras on mission trips, Nadine Cox and Dr. Bob and Linda Blair. That we've had mission teams that have gone to Jamaica and to New Orleans and to Pine Ridge Reservation and to Joplin, Missouri and to Eastern Kentucky and beyond. That our youth every year go on a mission trip. Our witness at First Christian Church does go from our doorsteps to the ends of the earth. It goes from our doorsteps because we support so many ministries right here in town. You see 2 of those ministries right here, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. Not a single one of these young men or women are members of our church. But all of them are engaged in this through the benefit and through the giving of this congregation. And they know it. That's why they're here today. We engage by helping and giving to Rossum, by giving to the Access Soup Kitchen, by collecting food for the food pantry. We do it by volunteering at the Women's Shelter, at the Simon House, at Thornhill. From our doorsteps to the ends of the earth, First Christian Church is involved in witnessing, in loving, and in serving. So this morning we turn for the first time to the second half of our mission statement. To the second half, which tells us that we want to be a true community. That we want to be a faithful church that demonstrates true community. We'll talk about the next 2 after that in the next 2 weeks. But a faithful church that demonstrates true community. What does it mean to be a faithful church? Is that an oxymoron? Aren't all churches faithful? Well, certainly at some level all churches are faithful, and at some levels no church is faithful. Because churches are made up of people like me. And I'm not always faithful. And people like you, and you're not always faithful. So there will be times in a church's life when we will not respond in a faithful way. We will respond in a way that best reflects our own worst prejudices, rather than reflecting our highest ideals and goals. To be a faithful church means that we don't preach out of the New York Times newspaper. That we don't preach out of Esquire magazine. That we don't even preach out of the guidebook's devotional. That we preach out of the Bible. And that it's read each and every week in our church. To be a faithful church begins with where we worship and how we worship. This church worships well. We have good music. We use scriptures. We have responses. We gather at Christ's table. I'll let you judge the preaching for yourself. but it starts here and moves out from there to be a faithful church. In our reading this morning from the Gospel of John, John chapter 13, we heard the story of the foot washing. Except I forgot to have them read it. So it might be a good thing if I sit down right now and we hear the story that I'm going to preach from. This happens a lot around here.
I will be reading John chapter 13, verses 1 through 11. Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know what I am doing, but you will later understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who is bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And all you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean."
After he had washed their feet, had put on his robe, and had returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example that you also should do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the ones who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them."
Thank you. It's interesting how just a few words could change the whole thing. Now, if I'd have said, "And now we're going to hear the reading of the story of foot washing," I'd look so smart. just a couple of different words is all that, So, what does true community look like? What does true community look like? I would suggest that true community begins and ends in this story that was just read. The story of foot washing. First of all, it was a gathered community, and they were gathered for supper. They were gathered for supper. That's something we do pretty well here. There was this community gathered for supper. And Jesus, who is obviously, from everything that we've read and heard, the most important person in the room at that moment in time, Jesus gets up from the table, he takes off his robe, he picks up a towel and puts it across the front of him, he gets a basin of water, and he starts moving down underneath the table or around the room, washing the people's feet. I'm sure they needed washing. It was a dirty time to live. They didn't have waterproof shoes when it was muddy or wet out. They wore sandals that got dusty and dirty no matter what. You know how often when you come into a room or in the house from the outside, the first thing you do is you kick off your shoes because you don't want to drag in mud and dirt, etc., because there's probably somebody else in the house that doesn't appreciate it either. Jesus takes the water basin and works down the road, and apparently some of the disciples accepted this ministry without any question. Of course, if there's going to be someone that's going to object, we all know it's going to be Peter. Peter is going to say what everybody else is thinking, but is too afraid to say. We all hate Peter, because he's got the nerve to say what we're thinking, and we say, man, I wish I could have said that. You aren't going to wash me, Lord. Not a chance are you washing my feet. Peter was willing to be a servant, but Peter was not willing to be served. And you see, to have a true community, both of those things must be present. It must be a gathered community where people are willing to serve and people are willing to be served. Do you think about our communion service at all? And service? When the elders come up and pray, they are praying on your behalf. They are serving you. Each and every one of you could be praying at that time, but they pray on your behalf. And then the deacons take the trays like waiters and waitresses and serve you. Have you ever said thank you when they gave you the tray with the cup or the bread? Have you even recognized that that's what they're doing, is that they are serving us? Have you ever said, oh no, I'm not going to take communion from you. You're not a good enough Christian. Not you. Peter says, not you. You're too good a Christian. I can't take communion. I can't have my feet washed by you. And what does Jesus say? Okay, that's fine. You don't want your feet washed by me? Well, just take your robe and your sandals and go home. Because you don't belong in this community. If you cannot allow me to serve you, you can't stay here. You can't stay. A faithful church demonstrating true community has to be a place where we're willing to serve and we're also willing to be served. The book of Hebrews tells us that we are to be about stirring up the people in our community. That we're to be about encouraging. Now, I'm not sure that encouraging and stirring up are necessarily the same thing. I think encouraging usually is, you did a really good job, thank you. I think stirring up is, that wasn't very good. You could have done a lot better than that. And sometimes that's exactly what we need to hear. Sometimes that's just grousing. And if you are a true community, there's no place for grousing. Now, the word itself tells us what we're looking at. We're looking at a unity of purpose. A group of people that have a unity of purpose. That there is something that has called them and brought them all to the same place. A common belief, a common purpose, a common goal, and that they are going to do everything in their power to bring about unity. Not to divide, but to bring about unity. And we bring about unity in encouraging and sometimes in stirring up, in praying for and serving, in being prayed for and being served. Community is a place where unity is valued as one of its highest ideal. When we say we want to be a true community, we are saying that after sharing the good news of God in Jesus Christ, which was in that first half, that after that, our next most important thing is to be a faithful church that demonstrates community. There are times where this church most beautifully displays community. Think of the Women's Bazaar. I see some eyes being rolled. But think of it. Women from all parts of the church all joined together for one thing: to sell Russ's bird houses. All joined together to do one thing: to serve the people outside this church. The men coming together to serve food to the people outside the church, not because we can't do ministry on our own, but we do ministry through them by inviting them to participate with us. Inviting them to participate with us. Inviting them to share their goods with us so that we can share the good news through them and through ourselves. I think one of the times where we are a beautiful community is on Christmas Eve. That 11 o'clock service. There are more people from the community in that service than there are our own people. It may be the only time they come through our church doors, but we are providing a ministry for them without taking up an offering. We provide a ministry to them to celebrate the birth of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And what was up at the top? That we want to share the good news of Jesus Christ. What is going on right now may be our best ministry. Larry's up there, Larry was over there, Gary's up there, Carla's up there. It's a ministry that puts this church on the airwaves live at 10:45 every Sunday morning. Reaching into hospital rooms, into nursing homes, into houses all across Franklin County. We are sharing in that way the good news of Jesus Christ, and we do that in the unity of our giving. If you don't put money in the offering plate, that ministry could be lost because it costs money to do it. But it's worth it to us because it's one of the ways that we can be and we can share and we can just demonstrate true community. Now, does that mean that we never squabble? No. Does that mean that there aren't some fights once in a while? No. But it does mean that when we are squabbling and when we are fighting, that it is never a goal to destroy the unity. The goal is always to improve our unity, to draw us closer together. And if that's not the goal, then it shouldn't be happening. When we stir one another up, we stir one another up to make the community stronger, to make it better, to better be able to serve this community, our doorstep, to the ends of the earth. To be a true community means we've got to be like Peter. Yeah, this same guy who earlier in our story said, you are not washing me. And Jesus said to him, Peter, you don't know what you're turning down. You have no idea what you're doing when you're saying no. You can't be part of me if you won't let me wash you. And Peter says, I'll take a shower. I'll take a bath, not just my feet, but my whole body. Peter jumps into the pool with both feet and gets involved and gets engaged and becomes the leader of that new church. This one who denies and betrays and who doesn't want to have his feet washed has a change of heart and wants to be part of a community that serves and is served, that shares the good news of God in Jesus Christ, that demonstrates faithfulness. Faithfulness doesn't mean never failing. It just means getting back up and going on. And we've done that time and time again in this church. And we will continue to do that as long as our purpose is to be and to share the good news of God in Jesus Christ by being a faithful church, demonstrating true community. Community that we practice at this table each and every Sunday. And I do mean practice. It's not easy to welcome everybody. There are some people in this room we might not like. There may be somebody in this room that we're fighting with. But we come to this table and we say, I can set that aside for the sake of the good news of God in Jesus Christ. And the Apostle Paul tells us that whenever we eat the bread and drink the cup, we proclaim Christ. The very act of communion is a proclamation of who Christ is in this world and who Christ is in our lives. Who Christ is in our lives. True community starts with individuals whose hearts are soft and pliable and tender, but whose backs are stiff and strong and powerful. Because it takes both. It takes those who can serve and those willing to be served. And at the center of it is the good news that God is in the business of changing lives and changing hearts. This church has been a true community for 180 years. You think the Scout Troop being 110 years old, add some on to it. A true community for 180 years. We will remain a true community as long as we stay focused on our purpose. Amen.